Hello, you wonderful people. This is GregsynthWizard, and before I do any sort of TierMaker videos in relations to the episodes and bloopers and get back to concert uploads because, man, I got a laundry list of things to upload, and I got people pounding on the doors and the pitchforks coming out and the flaming torches all heating up the apartment. I gotta do this. And this is an updated TierMaker ranking video. And I've been wanting to do this for quite a while, but I wanted to wait till we got the 93 TierMaker done and the blooper video done. And both of them are done. They're sitting on my hard drive, and they will be uploaded fairly soon, probably within the next couple of days. I just want to get this updated TierMaker video out because for the first time on the 93 TierMaker that included Ray Cooper, we are using this up-to-date TierMaker ranking system. And if you notice, there's 8 tiers now as opposed to 7. We added an extra one, F. And this one was sort of born out of necessity and just several conversations I had with the Elton Bootlegs and Ethan Tony Thompson Murray and TSS Killer. Because when we would talk about shows, off of, these projects, we were just kind of like talking in Discord or Mumble or Facebook or whatever. We were always going back to certain shows and thinking, this wouldn't fit in this tier because it's better or it's worse than this. And there were shows that, say, the Elton Bootlegs was listening to where he would rank them at the bottom tier on the old TierMaker system, but it would be much worse than something else that was E or something to that effect. So this kept coming around a lot of the time where I was getting asked, like, where would you put this? Where would you put that? And I'm like, why don't we discuss updating the TierMaker system? Because we've had the 7 tiers, ever since we started doing this. And do you think we should do an 8th tier? Like an F or something. And the general consensus among the 4 of us was yes, we should. And I found out as we were testing this new TierMaker system, it not only made ranking lower end shows a bit easier because then we had to kind of siphon through D, E, and F and kind of tweak the definitions a bit, but it was also making some other rankings a bit easier to think about. So instead of, thinking about, well, this is in between, A and B or something, it kind of stretched out the tiers a bit and made it a little bit easier to think about shows. And as I kept going back to it, I'm thinking, I think this is a really good idea. I'm all for it. I fully support it. And the other 3 guys thought it was a great idea, and I was like, yeah, let's do it. So we gave the stamp of approval, and starting with the upcoming 93 TierMaker with Ray Cooper, we applied the 8-tier system, which goes from AllStar to F. And I think it was a good move overall, and this is likely going to be the normal TierMaker now. We're not going to add any other tiers. We're not going to go back to the old one. I'm still going to keep the old video up because, for archival purposes, but that is now effectively obsolete. But I'll still keep it up, just to watch it from time to time and, to check comments and so other people can watch it too. And also, I was asked about, well, what would you do with all the previously ranked shows? On the 84 tours and the 85, 86 UK tour and the European 86 tour and in the big picture tour. And I said, just leave them the way they're at, because as I think about it, I really wouldn't change too much personally on those rankings if we applied the 8-tier system to those shows. Now, I'm not talking about like a personal TierMaker where it's just me putting it on there, but as a whole group, as when the 4 of us, we would come together and discuss this. It's a team effort, and we figured that, well, we got those other tier makers out, we wouldn't change much, if anything. So we're leaving those at the normal rankings we gave them, and starting from this 93 one, we're going to apply the new tier maker, which makes total sense to me. I'm not going to fight that. So there's a little bit of a backstory about that, and I'm going to discuss the tiers now, because with the eighth tier being present, it makes it a bit easier not only to rank but also to describe, what each ranking means. And I included a few pictures here, mostly the 92 1 tour. I just threw random pictures on here just because it said I needed at least 5 images to do a tier maker here. So I'm just going to drag, 92 Elton up through here. And as I go through each of the rankings, I'm going to, just drop them right next to it and explain everything. So starting with the top ranking, AllStar. Fairly self-explanatory. It's the AllStar shows. Cream of the crop, the best of the best, the highest rank, and the absolute best you can get from Elton. These shows are excellent shows like you would find in S, but these are excellent with just even more to them. These are truly special shows. These are shows where the band is absolutely on fire and like not only giving their all, but they're maybe throwing some extra stuff in there. They're going above and beyond. Like they're not giving 100% or 110%, they're giving 150%. And then, Elton would be not only in great voice, but, maybe extra gutsy, extra energy, giving his all. Like there's something special in the air. The planets align, the stars align. Like everything goes right, and they're truly special shows. And they're the kind of shows where, if you listen to them, it's like, yeah, this really just this hits me in the right places, and you often get a really 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 good feeling from these shows. Like you not only you want to go back and listen to them again, but they warrant repeat listens, and you're just like mesmerized by these shows. And Elton has had all-star shows in the past, and it's not the most common rank, but it's not the rarest. And you'll see a fair amount of all-star shows throughout the decades. So yeah, all-star is where you want to be if you want, some of the best stuff. And also, when we rank the shows on these tier makers, we don't rank it based on the tour leg average ranking. Like, for example, the best show from a tour leg won't be necessarily an all-star show, and the worst show won't necessarily be an F, because that wouldn't make any sort of sense. These shows are ranked on their own merit. What we hear on these recordings, what we get from these performances, the vocals, the musicianship, the atmosphere, everything. We use the show as its own ranking, not comparing it with an average. And obviously we're going to compare the shows with each other on the tier maker, but it's not like you won't always get the instance where the highest ranking show or the best show would be an all-star. It could be an S, it could be an A, but that's how we would rank them. We don't do tour leg averages. We rank them on their own merit. And occasionally we might compare a show to something from a different tour leg, usually within the same decade, just to kind of reference it. But usually we like to focus on the show's own performances and the show's own merit and everything on that show to give it its appropriate ranking. So All Star are truly special shows. Not the most common, but they exist, and it's not as rare as you think, especially with some of the stuff that I've been hearing. And I'm not going to give away things I've been listening to, but there's been some shows that I've been listening to that are just outright phenomenal. Like I wouldn't hesitate to throw an S and perhaps All Star, But yeah, that would be AllStar. S the S tier is your general excellent shows. These are generally, extremely good shows that are very well rounded, have excellent performances throughout. If someone is saying, man, I really love this show and this is excellent, typically it's going to go in S. The real difference between S and All Star is the S tier, although they're excellent shows and I will always recommend anything in S, um, they don't always have all of those special ingredients that will truly push it to like that little level upwards to get it to All Star. There might be an instance where, okay, maybe there's a couple more mistakes compared to an All Star. Maybe there's a performance or two that isn't quite up to the measuring stick that some of the other ones are, but they're still good performances. But there's not too much difference between S and All Star, and S's are quite common with Elton. Excellent shows all around, and S is a very, very good ranking, obviously, and it's one of the rankings you should shoot for. And yeah, it's general excellence all around, really good. It might lack a couple of things here and there compared to something that's an all-star, like say maybe Elton's voice is in excellent shape, but maybe the musicianship is not quite to the level of another show, but there's something else there that'll keep it really highly ranked. So you kind of have to factor in some things to kind of rank shows in S and kind of then compare them to all-star, but generally S shows are quite common, and it's a rank you would like to see because it's very, very good. Next tier would be A's. Now A shows are, again, high rank. They're very good shows. Still would recommend A shows, although we're gonna be starting to get into maybe some inconsistencies that would be popping up that wouldn't be prevalent on S, and especially not All Star. Like A shows would be, yeah, these are great shows. These are very good shows. But I would take this, and this over this. That's sort of kind of the objective that I've been seeing with A shows, is where while they're good and they can be great and even have some excellent stuff on them, they don't quite measure up to S and All Star. A shows would be stuff like where, say, Elton's in great shape, but I've heard him in better shape vocally at another show, and yeah, the musicianship's great, but they're missing a bit of that eighth cylinder that's on another show, like stuff like that. So they're good shows, they're great shows, and they can be still consistent shows, but maybe some inconsistencies would pop up that aren't on the other ones. And I'm not going to give away, obviously, stuff on the 93 TierMaker on this video, but to use other TierMakers as an example for the rankings I currently went through. For example, we put The Last Belfast of 86 at All-Star because Elton was just so consistent throughout the whole show. The band were on fire. There was a great atmosphere, and after Elton shakes off a couple little nerves on the first two songs, he's like absolutely ready, and he does battle on stage. And he's in amazing shape, and his voice is just, it's some of the best singing you'll hear from that era. And the band is top notch, very, very tight, and the solos are fantastic. So it's just amazing all around. And then a good example of an S tier show would be something. We'll go to the '84 era. A good S show that I would think would be deserving of that would be something like Vienna '84, which, if I recall correctly, although myself and TSS Killer ranked it as a solid S, maybe pushing into the higher tier of S. The Elton Bootlegs was thinking, high S, maybe AllStar. Um, so yeah, Vienna was a very high ranking S show, and what made that show that high was just it was excellent all around. There was a ton of energy behind it. The band were trying out a couple different ideas with D especially on Restless, you know, giving his all and experimenting, and Elton sounding powerful throughout, and there weren't a lot of mistakes really. There was a couple little odd things here and there, like the Tiny Dancer roughness, and a couple odd things here and there, but it was generally an excellent show, and I love that show to death. It's one of my favorites to listen to from '84, and the shows that we would have put over that one would have been something like the first Milan show, or Leeds, or Edinburgh, because they're just very slightly better in some aspects compared to Vienna, but Vienna's no slouch at the office, so that's a good example of an S show. And then as we're talking about A, we had some very solid A shows come through the TierMaker, and our most recent TierMaker before the '93 one, which was the '86 European leg. We had quite a few shows in A, like Madrid and Lille, and the Vienna shows, Rotterdam. But yeah, those shows we put in A because they were very, very solid all around. Great performances, great musicianship, and Elton mostly having good days vocally, good performances, despite at that time having the warning signs of the impending vocal destruction. But like Lille, for example, was ranked on A, and I believe it was the highest ranked show because of the amount of energy, the tight band, the great solos, and Elton were still remaining in very good voice with some of his UK power coming through. But what dropped that to A as opposed to like an S was, Elton kind of not being vocally 100% on a few songs like One Horse Town, figuring out the phrasing, starting to dodge notes on Rocket Man, and kind of taking a bit for him to get into the groove, but once he does, he's fine. Uh, Stuff like that's kind of what led it to A, but it was still a great show overall. So A shows are generally great shows. Good listens and some excellent performances are often a part of A shows. Still a ranking that I would recommend, and a very common ranking too. Um, Now next we'll go to B. Now B, we start to get into kind of it's pretty good. It's pretty solid. It's good. You know, this is kind of where we start to break into the uh somewhat inconsistency sort of a pattern going on, but other times it could be just shows that are there's a good listen, but there's better. Um B shows are generally solid. Uh, they often have good performances as the norm, but nothing really taking off into the stratosphere that would kind of set it apart from A shows and S shows, especially, and especially not AllStar. But B shows, they may have some consistency issues where, maybe Elton's voice isn't quite up to par in places, but he can still deliver okay. Or if he has an issue with his voice, the band are saving it, so it's bringing the ranking up a bit. That this is the ranking where the variables really start to come into play, and you'll start to see this ranking appear, I believe, in future tier makers. So that is actually an important ranking, and it's actually one of the ones that kind of sort of made a it's more special now that we have an extra tier there, because now we really have to think about what we're doing, especially with B shows down. So B shows are good. There's some greatness. You might get like the oddball wonderful performance, but they're just there. They're good, but they're not the most recommended shows usually. But they're often not offensive, and there's no shame in having a B show as a lower ranking show for a tier maker, because it's generally pretty decent. But if a tier maker has a high level of shows that are like an A and S and maybe AllStar, and then you suddenly get like a B show getting in there, then it starts to lead to, okay, this may have been an off night in comparison to some of the other ones. So, yeah, B shows are still important and they are pretty common too. So, I would say for Elton, B, A, and S are probably the most common ones, and then All Star is not rare, but not it's not like you throw the ranking out like candy or anything. So B show, not really the ranking I would shoot for, in hopes to get a show on a tier maker. But if it's there, if it does rank there, it's there. But I, B shows are still generally pretty good. C. Now, C is this can be defined as average at best, passable, okay, decent at best, stuff like that. These shows often have consistency issues where maybe Elton's not having a good vocal day at all, but the music is so good that the it buffs the ranking up to something like that, like a C instead of maybe a E or a D or something. But C shows are there's something about them now that's really starting to question, the rankings. Like, why are we putting it at C? Well, it could be anything. It could be Elton having a bad night. It could be very sloppy playing at times from the band. It could be, a ton of inconsistencies going on. It could be roller coaster shows where some performances are really good, others are a little bit of a head scratcher. So they're very you'll sometimes get shows like that. We've had plenty of those. Like for example, on the '84 tier maker, the American League, we had some B shows early on, like Tempe and Tucson, because they were fairly solid, but they were run of the mill. The band weren't quite seasoned yet, and Elton was good, but yet to reach his tour peak, for that leg. So that's why we would throw shows like that at B. And then for C, we had stuff like Dallas, where Elton's mind is all over the place and he doesn't know words to songs, and some of the piano playing's a little sus, but the musicianship in general was good and it's entertaining, so it kind of saved it. Um, but C shows, they could be passable, average at best. Sometimes it can get into mediocre status. You start to get into the mediocrity where, okay, it's not that good, but it could be worse. So there's a lot of free reign with C shows. If you want to think positive, it could be, well, it's passable, it's decent. But if you want to think more negatively, it could be, it's full of mediocrity. It's not that good. But generally for C, it kind of is teetering in the middle there, where it could be a lot better, but it could be a lot worse. Now we go to D. Now this is where the questionable stuff really starts to be at the forefront. D shows are generally mediocre shows with some semblance of goodness in them. Maybe a shining moment here or there that kind of saves the gig from being a disaster or bad, but still not a highly recommended tier. As you can see, now we're in the bottom half here. But the D shows, they're mediocre. They're not, they generally aren't like poor shows, like the worst of the worst, but it starts to get really questionable. D shows would be stuff like, let's say '84 tier maker for America. We had stuff like St. Paul, where like Elton is so off on songs that he's like throwing the band into chaos and doesn't know where he's at, and it's affecting the band, and it's just a mess to listen to. Like the state of mind is gone. Another D show I can recall would be the second Worcester show from '84, where yeah, the music's great overall, but Elton's voice is not in great shape, and he's rough, and he doesn't sound very good, and state of mind's off. And then there's Charlotte '84, the where Elton's state of mind is so reckless that he's like overdriving his voice to death, and it's like it sounds, makes my throat hurt listening. It sounds like he's swallowing glass, and state of mind is all over the place. And the band save it, with some good musicianship, but it's still not a show I would recommend. And then you got stuff like Barcelona '86, where I don't really need to explain that show, but it's good for comedy, but not a great show in general. But yeah, D shows aren't great. They're mediocre, but they're not the worst of the worst. They're often saved by either something being good that would elevate it from going down to E or F, or it could have some passable performances that'll rank it up a bit. But yeah, that's the mediocre shows. You don't want to be there, and you especially don't want to be in the E tier, because to date we haven't had a show go into E. Not on the TierMaker we just did for '93, and none of the shows we discussed on earlier TierMakers made the cut for E. Even with the revised TierMaker, none of them got to E. But E shows are bad shows. They're poor. They're not recommended. It's like, let's take the mediocrity and like make it worse. Let's have Elton not be in good form. Maybe his voice is totally shot. Maybe the mind is so bad. Band is really sloppy. Bad atmosphere. Just stuff at this point. Stuff is really affecting the show. And even somebody who isn't a dedicated Elton John show listener will notice issues like this happening, where it's just, there's a lot of things going wrong. It could be a by the numbers sort of a gig where they're just, there's nothing special at all, and just there's a bad feeling about it. There's just sloppy playing, or Elton's not in good form mentally or physically, and you really don't want to get into this level, because they're not good at all. And there's a big jump from D to E, because at least with D you often have passable performances kind of saving it, or something is good on there that kind of saves it. But on E shows, there's really not a lot that saves it. The only real difference between something like E or F would be E I would describe as bad shows with some redeeming qualities. Say maybe there's something good there going on. Maybe you'll get a good solo. Maybe there's a couple performances that aren't as bad as others. Maybe there's some sort of positivity you can find, but they're not great. They're bad shows. And that brings me to the last tier, which is F. Hopefully we won't have to go into this tier. And this is essentially the worst of the worst. The bad shows that not only are bad, but you can't find really anything redeeming at all. Unlistenable. It could be just, it's essentially an E show without so many of the redeeming qualities. And these are the ones where, I will discuss them with the Elton Bootlegs and TSS Killer and Ethan Tony Thompson Murray. And there's probably not going to be a lot of differences between E and F. It just depends on how many saving moments there are, and how many silver linings and stuff happen. Because if you get a show where nobody's it's just, there's nothing really redeeming, and the best part you can say is, well, they're on stage and they're playing the song, then yeah, that's a good example of an F tier show. So there has to be something that really affects it. There's had got to be either a ton of mistakes or there's just nothing special about the show, and it's just there's nothing worth listening to on it. Even with an E show as bad as those would be, you can find something that can like say, well, at least this happened. F shows don't have that. It's bad shows without redeeming qualities, and they're the worst of the worst. So that will conclude this video with the updated tier maker rankings. And I hope to see you soon. And I hope you enjoy the upcoming 1993 Ray Cooper tier maker and the uploads that will follow after the tier maker and the bloopers, where I go back to different eras. Talk to you guys later. Hope you have a nice day, afternoon, evening, night, whatever time zones you are in. Bye bye.